Before we proceed, a word of caution. This content demands discretion from its audience. Presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes, what follows is a dramatized reconstruction based on federal courtroom proceedings and public testimony. Step into this narrative with eyes wide open, for the truth unfolds in the stark light of justice. The courtroom hums like a taut wire. Reporters hunch over notebooks, their pens scratching like insects in the dim light. Lawyers murmur, their whispers sharp against the silence. The judge, a stoic figure behind the bench, adjusts her glasses, her gaze sweeping the room. Sean Diddy Combs lounges at the defense table, a smirk curling his lips as if he owns the air itself. The jury, faces tight with anticipation, waits for the next witness. Then the back doors swing open. No announcement, no entourage, just Will Smith. Gasps ripple through the room. A juror drops her pen. Even the judge freezes, her gavel hovering. Will walks forward, slow, deliberate, his face stripped of the Fresh Prince charm. His eyes, raw and unyielding, carry 20 years of weight. He doesn't glance at Diddy, doesn't acknowledge the press. He moves to the stand like a man stepping into a storm he's chosen to face. "I wasn't asked to come here," he begins, his voice low, steady. "I asked to speak." The room shifts. Diddy's smirk falters. Something is coming and no one is ready. It started with a phone call, a mutual contact someone Will trusted pitched it casually. Diddy's birthday bash. Low-key, just music, networking, the usual. Will had been to parties like that, glitzy, star-studded, the kind where deals are made over champagne. He didn't think twice. The mansion in the hills told a different story. Black SUVs lined the drive, their engines idling like a warning. Security guards, stone-faced, patted him down, their hands lingering too long. "Phone," one grunted, holding out a tray. Will handed it over, a knot forming in his gut. "For privacy," they said. Privacy for who? Inside, the air was thick, the lights dimmed to a crimson glow. Mirrors lined the walls, reflecting every move, every glance. The music wasn't festive. It was low, rhythmic, almost hypnotic, like a pulse you couldn't escape. Will sipped a drink, scanning the room. Faces he knew from film sets, music videos, award shows. Some smiled too wide, others avoided his gaze. Then Diddy appeared, gliding through the crowd like a king. "Will," he said, his smile sharp, "now you're part of the family." The words landed like a claim. Will followed him to a back room, expecting talk of projects, deals. Instead, the door closed, and the world tilted. Men, women, some too young to be there, moved in ways that weren't performance. They were surrender. Recognizable faces, names from billboards, stood watching, their laughter hollow. Diddy leaned back, grinning, as if it were a Tuesday matinee. "This," he said, "is how we celebrate." Will's stomach churned. He wanted out, but the door felt miles away. That was the point. Once you're in, you're in. Days later, the phone rang. No caller ID. "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince," the voice said, then clicked off. Will brushed it off. A prank, maybe. Then the envelope arrived. Unmarked, delivered to his office. Inside, a flash drive. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the laptop. Curiosity won. The screen flickered, and there he was. Will Smith, on a couch at that party, laughing, slurring, his eyes half closed. He didn't remember being that gone. Behind the camera, a voice. Diddy's voice. That's how we keep him. Fear clawed at his chest. This wasn't an invitation. It was an initiation. The invitations kept coming. More parties, more celebrations. Will declined, politely at first, then firmly. The fallout was swift. Movie roles he'd been negotiating vanished. Colleagues stopped returning calls. Gossip blogs spun stories. Will was unstable, unfaithful, hiding secrets. The rumors were oddly specific, as if someone had peeked into his life. He stayed quiet, smiled through red carpets, buried the fear. Silence was the price of peace. But peace never came. Every award, every blockbuster, felt like a leash tightening. It wasn't just Will. Diddy's reach was a spiderweb, stretching across Hollywood's foundation. In 2013, Will was set for a global campaign with a luxury brand. The deal was nearly signed, the lookbook shot. Then he declined another Diddy invite. 2 weeks later, the brand dropped him, no explanation. Gossip blogs erupted with stories, details only an insider could know. It was psychological warfare, Will told the court, his voice steady but hollow. You start to think you're crazy, paranoid, then you see the pattern. He saw it again in 2016 at a charity gala glittering with power, music moguls, tech titans, politicians. Behind the smiles, Diddy was the axis. Will watched an executive from a streaming giant slip Diddy a USB drive, whispering, "Only you have the final cut." The words hung in the air, a confirmation of what Will feared. Diddy wasn't just a player. He was the gatekeeper. Actors, rappers, CEOs, they laughed too hard at Diddy's jokes, deferred to him in every exchange. They weren't his friends. They were his survivors, tiptoeing to stay in his good graces. You couldn't step onto a major stage without brushing his shadow, Will said. He didn't just collect people, he controlled them. The audio tape changed everything. Will heard about it through a call, not from the prosecution, but from someone he once trusted. "You're on it," they said. "They played it yesterday. People are talking." The floor dropped from under him. He hadn't known a tape like that existed. But the pieces clicked. Nights he couldn't fully recall, panic attacks triggered by certain names, the dread that shadowed every interview. He demanded to hear it. In a closed room, no press, no jury, just the judge and lawyers, they played it. Will's laughter filled the speakers, hollow, unnatural, like a stranger's. Slow music pulsed in the background, voices murmuring, cheers rising. Then Diddy's voice, clear as glass. "That's how we break them in." Will's name followed, twisted into something vile. "I sounded drugged," Will said, his voice cracking. "I didn't consent to that. I didn't agree to be filmed, to be used." The tape wasn't just evidence. It was a theft of his humanity. That night, he didn't sleep. Memories flooded back. The mansion, the mirrors, the envelope. He saw his kids' faces, imagined them reading headlines years from now. "If I stayed silent," he told the jury, "that tape would be my legacy. I couldn't live with that." The courtroom is a pressure cooker. Jurors lean forward, their eyes locked on Will. Diddy sits rigid, his fingers twitching. Will doesn't look at him. Not yet. "I was played," he says, his voice cutting through the silence. "I was filmed. I was used. And he knew exactly what he was doing." He recounts the system, invitations that were traps, declines that brought punishment. He speaks of others, names like Cassie, Meek Mill, caught in the same web. "He didn't just ruin careers," Will says, his gaze sweeping the room. "He made people fear the truth." Then he turns to Diddy, the air tightens. "You built an empire out of fear," he says, his words like a blade. "You called it success, you called it love, but it was control." He pulls a photo from his pocket, edges worn from years of carrying. "This is me, 2004, he says, holding it up. A young Will, grinning before the first party, before the leash. I haven't seen him in years." The jury is still, some with tears in their eyes. Will faces Diddy one last time. "Nobody lies like you," he says. "Nobody." He walks back to the stand, gathers his things, and leaves without a backward glance. Diddy sits, pale, his empire crumbling in the silence. The world explodes before Will reaches the courthouse steps. Hashtags ignite. Star Will Speaks Ox Diddy file. Clips of his testimony go viral, each word a spark. Fans aren't just shocked, they're furious. Furious at the system that let this fester, at the whispers dismissed as conspiracy. Old footage resurfaces. Will flinching at Diddy's name, parties where smiles looked forced. Hollywood scrambles. Executives cancel meetings. Agencies pause deals. PR firms fire off memos. Distance from Combs now. But the internet is relentless, unearthing clips of Diddy with A-listers, interviews where questions were dodged. The public sees it now, a machine built on silence. Will pays a price. 2 brand endorsements vanish within hours. A film's promotion halts. Texts flood his phone, some thanking him, others warning he's radioactive. One message chills him. You don't know who you just declared war on. But the people, the ones Diddy couldn't control, rally. Will posts a black and white photo online. Him in 1993, young, hopeful on a film set. He didn't know what was coming, the caption reads. I'm proud of him. Millions share it. Survivors, especially men, flood the comments. You gave us a voice, one writes. Rumors swirl of more subpoenas, executives, labels, media giants, whispers of sealed tapes, audio and video that could flip the industry upside down. Will's testimony didn't just crack the dam, it unleashed a flood. Will doesn't chase the spotlight. He cancels appearances, stays with his kids, rebuilds what matters. He's healing, a friend tells Variety. For the first time in years, he's not pretending. Back in the courtroom, the judge's voice cuts through the haze. What we heard today wasn't just testimony, she says. It was a reckoning. Jurors sit motionless, their faces heavy with the weight of truth. Diddy, for once, has no words. Outside, the world churns. Anger, confessions, questions. If Will Smith could be silenced for 20 years, who else is out there? What else is hidden? The era of silence is over, but the system still stands. For now, that's how the game works. Until someone speaks. The courtroom holds its breath, but the world outside erupts. Will Smith's testimony has ripped through the silence, exposing not just Diddy's crimes, but an industry that shielded them. Across the internet, clips of his words spread like wildfire, each syllable fueling outrage. Fans, once dismissive of whispers, now demand answers. Their anger aimed at a system that let this fester for decades. Yet, as survivors step forward and the public clamors for truth, a deeper question burns. How did this empire of fear thrive, unchallenged for so long? The answer lies not in the courtroom spotlight, but in the shadows where Diddy wove his web. One promise, one signature, one broken dream at a time. A penthouse bathed in flickering candlelight, the air heavy with the weight of ambition. A young woman, barely 19, sits at a polished table, her hands trembling as she clutches a pen. Across from her, Sean Diddy Combs leans forward, his voice a quiet command. Sign this, and your dreams will come true. That document, that non-disclosure agreement, is no mere contract. It's a chain, forged in a machine built to bind the vulnerable. Will's voice cracked the facade, but to grasp the full horror, you must trace it back to its source. To the system Diddy crafted, and the lives it devoured. Imagine a dimly lit penthouse, the flicker of candles casting shadows on the walls, the bass of a hip-hop track pulsing through the air like a heartbeat. A young woman, barely 19, sits at a polished mahogany table, her hands trembling as she grips a pen. Across from her, Sean Diddy Combs leans forward, his voice low and commanding. Sign this, he says, sliding a non-disclosure agreement across the table, and your dreams will come true. The paper isn't just a contract, it's a shackle, a promise of silence that will bind her to a world she can't yet comprehend. She hesitates, but his eyes don't waver. This is how the game works, he adds, the words landing like a verdict. She signs. That moment, that NDA, isn't an anomaly. It's a blueprint, replicated dozens, perhaps hundreds, of times over 2 decades. The problem isn't the singular story, it's the machine that churns them out. And the architect of that machine is Sean Combs. Diddy didn't just build a music empire with Bad Boy Records. He constructed a criminal enterprise, one that thrived on manipulation, coercion, and the complicity of an industry that looked the other way. From the infamous freak-off parties to a network of enablers who buried his secrets, this is a story of power weaponized to silence the vulnerable. The evidence is chilling. A 2016 surveillance video, grainy but unmistakable, shows Diddy assaulting his then-girlfriend Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway, a brutal glimpse into the darkness behind the glamour. That footage, aired publicly in May 2024, isn't just a scandal. It's a warning of what's to come, a crack in the facade that reveals a sprawling web of abuse, control, and cover-ups. This isn't about one man's fall. It's about an industry that let him rise, and the victims who are finally breaking their silence. The courtroom is quiet now, but the echoes of that penthouse linger. The NDA, the promise, the threat, they're all part of a system designed to trap. And to understand how it worked, you have to go back to the beginning, to the moment Diddy first learned to spot his prey. In the early 1990s, Harlem's streets buzzed with ambition, and a young Sean Combs was already a master at turning dreams into leverage. As he launched Bad Boy Records, he wasn't just scouting talent, he was hunting for the vulnerable. His targets were young, often teenagers, aged 14 to 25, from broken homes or rough neighborhoods, their eyes wide with the hunger for fame. They were kids like John Doe, a 16-year-old rapper who caught Diddy's attention at a Brooklyn audition in 1995. "You're the next Biggie," Diddy told him, his voice dripping with promise. "But first, you gotta prove you're loyal." That loyalty, John would later learn, had nothing to do with music. It was about submission. Diddy's playbook was meticulous, a predator's strategy cloaked in mentorship. He positioned himself as a savior, offering golden opportunities to those least equipped to question them. Programs like Flavor Camp, billed as artist boot camps, were less about training and more about selection. A former Bad Boy employee, speaking anonymously to investigators in 2024, revealed that candidates weren't chosen for their talent alone, but for their malleability. The ideal prey, someone desperate, isolated, with no one to turn to. "Find the ones who are hungry," Diddy allegedly wrote in a 2010 email to his team, uncovered during the federal probe. "They'll do anything to get out." The process was insidious. Victims were invited to Diddy's homes, studios, or exclusive parties, each step drawing them deeper into his orbits. A female dancer, identified only as Sarah in court documents, recalled her first encounter with Diddy at 18. "I thought I was being groomed to perform," she testified in 2025, her voice steady but heavy. "But I was being taught to stay quiet." Flavor Camp wasn't a launch pad, it was a training ground for compliance. Diddy's team, assistants, scouts, even club promoters, combed through cities, schools, and early social media platforms like MySpace to identify targets. They'd approach kids at open mics, talent shows, or late-night parties, dangling the promise of stardom. Once hooked, the victims were reeled in, their dreams weaponized against them. What made Diddy's approach so effective was its veneer of legitimacy. He wasn't a stranger in a dark alley. He was a cultural icon, a man who turned his own rags-to-riches story into a brand. To a teenager from the projects, his promises felt like salvation. But every invitation to a party, every late-night studio session, was a step toward a trap. The auditions were real, the contracts were signed, but the cost of entry was something no one explained until it was too late. "This is how the game works," Diddy would say, and for those young enough to believe him, the game was already over. Once the trap was set, Sean "Diddy" Combs didn't need to use force, at least not at first. His weapon was subtler, more insidious. The atmosphere he created, a carefully curated blend of allure, fear, and inevitability. Picture a Miami penthouse, its walls lined with mirrors reflecting every angle of the room, the air thick with the scent of liquor and sweat. Diddy sits in a leather armchair, his presence commanding, his eyes locking onto a young woman handed a glass of champagne. "Drink," he says, not as an order, but as an expectation. She hesitates, but his gaze doesn't falter. "This is how the game works," he adds, the phrase a mantra that echoes through every corner of his empire. Cassie Ventura, his former girlfriend, described it in her 2023 testimony. "He didn't force me to drink, but his eyes told me I had to." That moment, that glass, was the first step in a psychological unraveling, a process designed to erase boundaries until victims no longer recognized right from wrong. Diddy's manipulation was a masterclass in control, a three-step descent into submission. Step 1. The drink, often laced with GHB or ketamine, blurring consciousness just enough to dull resistance. Step 2. The introduction of sexual acts, framed as part of the party's culture. The infamous freak-off parties were no spontaneous bacchanals. They were scripted performances, complete with strangers invited to participate, cameras rolling to capture every moment, and Diddy orchestrating from the center. A female victim, identified as Jane Roe in court filings, recounted her first freak-off in 2024. They handed me a red dress, checked my weight, 128 pounds, good enough, and led me into a room with mirrors everywhere. I felt like I was playing a role, and if I didn't perform, I'd be cut. Step 3. Normalization. Over time, victims stopped questioning. They observed, adapted, and accepted the depravity as the cost of staying in Diddy's world. The September 2024 indictment revealed chilling evidence. Over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and vials of sedatives found in Diddy's Holmby Hills mansion, tools of a machine built to break wills. Jane Roe's voice cracked as she testified, "They gave me a drink. When I woke up, I was on a screen doing things I didn't remember." Diddy said, "Keep this quiet or everyone sees." The mirrors in that penthouse weren't just decor. They were a metaphor for Diddy's control, reflecting his victims back to themselves, distorted and powerless. The freak-offs were theaters of compliance, where every act was choreographed to make deviants feel routine. A former party planner, speaking to investigators, described the precision. There were rules, weight limits, dress codes, no tattoos. If you looked tired, they'd drip you with drugs to keep going. Victims became actors in a play they didn't write, their shame recorded as leverage. The process was so gradual, so deliberate, that many didn't realize they'd been stripped of agency until it was too late. By the time they saw themselves on those screens, the game had already claimed them. But Diddy's control didn't end when the party did. The penthouse doors may have opened, but an invisible cage snapped shut around his victims. Non-disclosure agreements, often signed by teenagers as young as 14, were the first bars of that cage, carrying penalties of $1 million per violation. A 2024 court exhibit displayed one such NDA, its fine print a labyrinth of threats disguised as legalese. Beyond the contracts, Diddy built a surveillance network that rivaled a small intelligence agency. Drivers, bodyguards, assistants, and even lawyers formed a web, tracking victims' every move. A former bodyguard, testifying anonymously, admitted, "I was told to log every call they made, every address they visited. If they stepped out of line, I reported it." The system was airtight, designed to detect any hint of rebellion. When federal agents raided Diddy's properties in March 2024, they uncovered over 100 laptops and phones, a digital vault holding terabytes of freak-off footage, meticulously cataloged like trophies. The cage wasn't just technological, it was social. Diddy's parties were star-studded affairs, attended by A-list rappers, actors, and moguls, their presence lending an air of normalcy to the depravity. A victim recalled a chilling moment. "I saw a famous rapper watch as I was pulled into a room. He turned away, like it was his cue." The silence of those celebrities was as crucial as the NDAs, a collective agreement to look the other way. Not because they didn't see, but because they knew when to avert their eyes. It wasn't that no one saw, a witness later told prosecutors. It's that everyone knew when to look away. That complicity, that unspoken code, turned Diddy's world into a prison without walls, where victims were watched, judged, and silenced by an entire ecosystem built to protect its king. The cameras stopped rolling, but the threat never did. For those who dared to speak, Sean Diddy Combs had a playbook to silence them, a ruthless machine that crushed dissent with precision. When Cassie Ventura filed her lawsuit in November 2023, accusing Diddy of years of abuse, the backlash was swift. Anonymous calls flooded her phone, their messages chilling. "You'll never work again." Tabloids, fueled by Diddy's PR team, branded her a gold digger, their headlines screaming betrayal. A female singer known for a single hit in 2009 faced a darker fate. After hinting at Diddy's secrets in a radio interview, her career vanished overnight. No gigs, no contracts, no trace. Whispers in the industry pointed to a car accident in 2017 that claimed a cameraman who'd allegedly kept copies of freak-off footage. The police called it a tragedy. Insiders called it convenient. Diddy's reach extended beyond threats and disappearances. He wielded media like a weapon, with outlets like Page Six publishing glowing profiles, such as a 2019 piece hailing him as a philanthropic titan, days after a victim filed an anonymous complaint. Churches, too, played their part, with pastors praising Diddy's donations while ignoring the screams behind his generosity. An email uncovered in the 2024 federal probe laid it bare. Diddy's PR team instructed an associate to handle a victim with a $50,000 payout, adding, "Make it quick." This wasn't about protecting an image. This was about rebuilding a god from the ashes of his sins. "I got a call at 3 a.m., a former Bad Boy intern testified in 2025, her voice trembling. "They said if I talked, my family would pay." Diddy's empire didn't just silence voices. It erased them, leaving behind a trail of broken lives and unanswered questions. But Diddy didn't operate in a vacuum. His power was propped up by the gatekeepers of pop culture, figures whose influence shielded him from scrutiny. Names like Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey, and T.D. Jakes didn't stain their hands with blood, but their clout cast a long shadow. When allegations surfaced, Diddy's team leaned on firms like Sunshine Sachs to orchestrate charity galas, where Perry and Oprah appeared alongside him, their presence a silent endorsement. A leaked 2020 email revealed the strategy. Get Tyler and O at the event. It'll drown out the noise. The noise was a lawsuit from a 22-year-old dancer buried under headlines about Diddy's generosity. T.D. Jakes, whose megachurch received millions from Diddy, preached sermons on forgiveness while sidestepping the accusations. Comedian Monique, in a 2024 interview, didn't mince words. They don't apologize. They buy silence. Her words painted a picture of a machine that operated like a cathedral, producing silence instead of salvation. Social media wasn't spared. X post from November 2024 exposed an influencer paid $10,000 to post a video defending Diddy, calling him a victim of cancel culture. These gatekeepers didn't just protect Diddy, they laundered his reputation, turning a predator into a pillar of the community. "I saw Oprah at one of his parties," a former assistant testified. "She smiled, shook hands, and left before the real show began." Their power wasn't in what they did, but in what they chose not to see. Their silence as deafening as the music in Diddy's penthouses. Diddy's story isn't the heart of the problem, it's a symptom of a deeper rot. The real scandal lies in a culture that thrives on deliberate amnesia, where power is built on the bones of the silence. Why did it take decades for the truth to surface? Who profited from the quiet? The 2016 video of Diddy assaulting Cassie Ventura, once a fleeting rumor, now plays on a courtroom screen. Its grainy frames exposing a man who thought himself untouchable. But the light doesn't just shine on him. It illuminates an industry that watched, nodded, and turned away. Cassie, Jane Roe, and countless others broke the rules of the game, their courage cracking open a vault of secrets. Yet the question lingers. Who's next? What boy or girl, eyes bright with dreams, will step into a room lit by candles, a camera whirring in the dark? "I signed the NDA at 17, Cassie said in her 2025 testimony, her voice steady. "But I'm not signing my silence anymore." Her words are a call to arms, a challenge to an audience that's been complicit too long. This isn't just Diddy's trial, it's a reckoning for everyone who looked away. Will you keep watching the screen, or will you demand the light stays on? The game only works if we let it. The gavel may fall, but the story is far from over. The shadows cast by Diddy's empire still linger, and more voices wait to break free. Join us as we unravel the next chapters, tales of courage, betrayal, and truth that will shake the foundations of power. Stay vigilant, stay tuned, for the revelations are just beginning. Until then, thank you for standing with us in this pursuit of justice. Farewell, and see you in the light of what comes next.